Hi everybody, Kevin Purcell here with a Theotech presentation. And what we're going to be doing here over the next few weeks in Theotech is we're actually going to be showing you or teaching you how to prepare a sermon or Bible study using the various Bible software programs. We're going to start with Logos Bible software. As you can see, I have this open to the home page. If you don't know how to get here, you look at this little home button up here. And there's a number of different approaches. A lot of people decide that, hey, I'm going to preach on a certain topic. And then other people say, no, I'm going to preach on a passage. They already know what verse. For example, they say, I want to preach on Ephesians 2, 8 through 10. Or they say, I want to preach on grace. And so you can go here and actually, we're going to start with the idea of going at it from a topical approach first. I recently just did a search here for redemption, and that opens up a Bible word study to redemption. Let me just show you what it looks like when you do it for the first time. You'll type in your word, your topic, and it's going to give you a list of suggested searches. For example, I could just search for redemption. I could search in my top Bibles, or I could search in my entire library. Gives you some keyboard shortcuts there. These are some resources that have the word redemption in the title. You might want to look at that and you say, oh, okay, yeah, I'd like to open up that book and get some ideas from that. Or you may just want to do what I think is probably the best approach to get started here, if you're going in a topical way, is do a Bible word study on the word redemption. So I selected that. It opens up a Bible word study and immediately does a search for redemption. And of course, you can drop that down right up there. The first section lets you identify this. You can give it a title, Redemption Sermon, maybe, a description. This is for my sermon that I'm going to preach February, what's this Sunday? I think the 25th, maybe, something like that, on redemption. And then the next section down here deals with topical focuses. And it looks for the word redemption in various dictionaries and such. For example, it has the word redemption in the Lexham Theological Word Book, so I could open that up and begin to read this article on redemption, and that might spur some ideas or thoughts about how I might want to cover this topic in a sermon, or it gives you some links to some verses. Maybe these verses will become the focus of your sermon. If you're doing a topical approach, you might take kind of the outline of this and use that, although I'm not a big fan of topical preaching, but you could do that. Or maybe you create a whole sermon series, redemption in the Old Testament or something like that. That's kind of a boring title, but you might think of it that way. You could open up in some of these other books. Let's look in the pulpit commentary notes, and it's got a whole bunch of passages here that you could look through. There's also a Hebrew word study. So this could give you some thoughts, redemption, how it's used. Redemption, dealing with price, is kind of a focus. A blood redemption, let's look at that one. That's kind of interesting. Isaiah 63:4, for I planned the day of redemption and the year of my redemption came. So maybe that would be a thought. Oh, okay, I want to preach on Isaiah 63:4, and let's look at this passage. I might use all four of these verses or 1 through 6 because that's the pericope in the Christian Study Bible, or I mean, the Christian Standard Bible. But anyway, so you might do that in the Hebrew word study. You have the Greek word study, and find each of these words, look at them both, and see what the Bible has to say about each of these Greek words for redemption. Phrases, there's no results there. The lemma and commentaries. And then you do some textual searches, and it'll just quickly search your favorite Bible for the word redemption using the fuzzy search and then an aligned search. And so that might be a good way to get started, wanting to check it out based on passages like that. And so what we've essentially done here is we've started with a topical approach, and it's going to lead us to some passages that would be good, either one sermon on one of these passages, or it could be a topical study on a few of these passages. Again, I'm not a big fan of that approach, but you could do it. So that's one way to do it. But we'll go back here to the beginning. Another thing to do is using these guides. There's multiple guides. if you're taking the topical approach, we've just done the Bible word study search, but there's two other guides that I think are a great start for a topical beginning if you're looking for a topic. Let's open up the Sermon Starter Guide. This is a guide that will let us search for things that might be a good way to get started with a sermon. So we're going to find the word redemption, and it looks again for the theme, and it's going to do a topic, suggest a topic guide. We had these guides, and this was the next one down here. So we'll look at that later. You can open up the fact book. The fact book in Logos is a very useful tool, and ransom is one of the ideas that could be something you would want to deal with in a sermon on that. It's got some media, that might be a good tool to use if you're a preacher who presents while you preach. Taking a little while to download that. Anyway, Isaiah 61:3 showed up showing it in a visual format. Or maybe you just want to open again the word redemption, since that's really was the focus, more of this media. Here are key verses, and then also a more exhaustive list of verses, or you can open up 110 passages with the word redemption. Again, it shows us our dictionaries, and then the fact book also does what we get over here, and that is preaching resources, senses. That gives you more than just a dictionary definition. It's a sense of how it's used in the Bible. So anyway, you know what the fact book is and how it works. It's a great tool, especially if you're wanting to take a topical approach as the way that you're starting off. But using this sermon study guide, this again does the key passages and pericopes, just like the fact book did. But then we also get some sermons. So let's say we want to open up George Whitefield, Sermon 44, Christ, the believer's wisdom, righteousness, sanctification, and redemption. And that might be something that would inspire you. Again, be careful opening up someone else's sermon before you're ready to preach your sermon, because you might accidentally plagiarize that work. But it's a good way to get some inspiration again. Preaching resources will show you mostly illustrations or sermon outline books. The only way I would suggest you use a sermon outline is, number one, if you're really, really pressed for time, maybe you had a death in your church and you've been dealing with that, plus, a bunch of committee meetings and had to get your taxes done or something. And so now it's Friday afternoon and you still haven't figured it out. So maybe do this, but, always, again, give credit where credit's due so that you're not stealing from someone else. Steve Green's MIDI hymnal. Maybe there's a passage or there's a song that will really inspire you, to write a good sermon. Redeemed, How I Love to Proclaim It. Could be one of those. Again, there's just a ton of resources. This is mainly just looking for inspiration and thoughts and ideas to get you started. Again, these guides, we have the topic guide. We can open up redemption in the topic guide, and it will look an awful lot like the sermon guide, but it's a little bit less sermon focused and more idea focused. Again, it offers to open up the fact book, the sermon starter guide, the Bible sense lexicon, and then lets you search for words that are related to the word redemption. Keywords, sermons, illustrations, these interactive tools, the Psalm Explorer and such. Media collections, and so there's more things. There are more things that you can look for. Now, this Sound Faith, if you're not familiar with it, these are other users can upload their sermons to Sound Faith. It's sort of like a YouTube for sermons, only it's focused, I think, mostly on audio, although I just don't use it. Maybe you don't have a whole lot in your library about redemption. You can go down here to the bookstore and search for books on it, and they'll be happy to sell you a bunch of books on redemption. But anyway, that's sort of taking a topical approach. Next time, our next video, we're going to look at, maybe you already know what verse you want to preach on, or generally have an idea what verse you want to preach on. And we're going to see how Logos can help you sort of narrow that focus, select the definite range of verses, the definite pericope or chapters or whatever it is, and go from there. But this has been Kevin Purcell with a Theotech presentation, How to Preach with Logos Bible Software.